In fact, I think we've got some very energetic lads that are about to join me here. So without further ado, I want to introduce Mats and Axel. They're e-commerce evangelists. It's a never-ending quest to educate people and get people jazzed for things. So on that note, I want to kick off the afternoon and introduce Mats and Axel. Thank you.
City. Welcome to GELF NYC Part 2, the afternoon. My name is Mats Fyrström.
And I'm Axel Lindgren.
And together we are known as Mats and Axel, and we are e-commerce evangelists from Sweden. And like the people we saw in the video here today, we have come to the US with a dream. Now, we don't pretend to be Albert Einstein or John Lennon for that matter, but we know a thing or two about e-commerce in Europe, and we want to share some of that knowledge with you here today.
And we believe that many of you here today are interested in Europe as a market for your products, and we got good news for you. We will soon introduce you to Mr. Gordon Knox of FitFlop, who will tell you his amazing story. But before we do that, we want to share some insights with you.
So, what are the differences between the US and Europe when it comes to e-commerce? Well, we need to stop talking about the Europe as a single area, because everyone here knows that not even the US is a single area. Even to sort of neighboring, seemingly similar states like New Hampshire and Vermont, they are vastly different. And of course, New Hampshire doesn't even have sales tax, so of course that makes a difference for e-commerce.
And that's that the US is big and complex. So is Europe. And like we said, different states in US differ. And Sweden, we see here, it's not like Spain. But the thing is with us Europeans, that delivery methods are super important.
Yeah. And in Europe, it's much more complex than this here in the US. If you look at the US, I mean, the 4 largest parcel delivery carriers, they amount to almost 98% of the total volume. And in Europe, that's much different. If you look at Europe, I mean, the top 4 carriers only, quote unquote, amount to 53% of the volume.
And you might think, yeah, that's Europe as a whole, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to sell to a few markets and then may not be so fragmented. But just let's look at UK. Okay. That's not too bad. The top 4 carriers stand for about 75% of the market. Let's have a look at Spain. Okay, now it's only less than 50%, and we also have new different carriers. So the European carrier landscape is quite fragmented.
Okay, and why is this? Well, all over Europe, local hero delivery companies, they are popping up. And these are super popular. And merchants who use these local heroes, they convert much more customers than those who aren't. And this is because consumers in Europe, they start to view themselves not only as being loyal to a particular brand, but also being loyal to a particular delivery company. And they will actively seek out merchants who offer these companies. And please note, I'm not talking about the delivery option, we're talking about a sort of box delivery or a home delivery. We're talking about the specific delivery company. So merchants who do not offer these delivery companies, they will sell less. And there might be people here thinking today, not all of you, but some of you might be thinking, yeah, we'll just use UPS, we'll just use FedEx for everything, and we will totally be fine, but that would be a mistake. Let me explain why. This here is my son. Okay, he plays baseball. He's on first base here, just had a base hit. Not a big deal if you're in the US, but in Sweden, this is a big deal. And why is that? Well, because there are more people probably in this room today than there are kids playing baseball in Sweden. It's really a niche sport. Yeah. So what does that mean for me as a dad? Well, it means it's really hard to get hold of proper baseball equipment. Okay? So my son, he needed a new glove. So what did I do? I went on the web, found a couple of US sporting goods stores, found the right glove, but But you see, the only option they offered as delivery was UPS. Of course, I have nothing against UPS as a company. No one here from UPS, good. But in Sweden, UPS delivery means one of two things. It's either home delivery when I'm not at home, we'll talk about that later, or it's a delivery to a pickup point, which is it's about a 10-minute drive from where I live, if I have the car, which I don't, because my wife has the car. This is Sweden. We only have one car per family. I know it sounds strange to you. So what I do, of course, I wouldn't walk 47 minutes to this pickup point. So what happened? I chose not to buy from this US vendor, but instead chose a Polish vendor. Why? Same glove, probably priced a little bit higher, but they offered me a choice of pickup points. So I could choose a pickup point very close to where I live, and not only is it close, but I also pass by here on my daily commute.
Yeah, and as Mats just said, in Europe we don't only have home deliveries. Deliveries to pick up and drop off points, they're also known as PUDOs and parcel lockers, are a thing that we like and actually use. But here in the US, it's called out-of-home deliveries.
Yeah, and to us as Europeans, that sounds like an out-of-body experience, something sort of strange, surreal. Well, to us in Europe, it's very real. Let's have a look at some numbers for this. Okay. In Belgium, 10% of all parcel deliveries are these so-called out-of-home deliveries, which you then can compare to the US number, which is 2%. So it's 5 times the volume. But does anyone want to venture a guess what the same figure is in Sweden? How much of the total parcel volume are out-of-home deliveries in Sweden?
Anyone want to guess? 90? Good one. Someone else? 58. So 58% of the total volume in Sweden go to these PUDOs or parcel lockers. When Amazon first entered Sweden, their general manager, who wasn't originally from Sweden, said in an interview that she was shocked that so many Swedes voluntarily would go to these PUDOs. She just couldn't understand it. Why do we do it? Why do we torture ourselves? Well, actually, we don't. We like our PUDOs and parcel locker. Why?
Well, for most of us in Sweden, home deliveries aren't really that convenient because in most families, both parents work. We have a really high degree of double earners, much, much higher than in the US. And that means that during the daytime, when most home deliveries take place, we aren't at home. So for us, it's much more convenient to go into a PUDO or a parcel locker. But that's not the same for all countries. If you look at countries like Greece, Switzerland, for instance, there the degree of double earners is much lower. And in those countries, home deliveries work really well.
But why not just leave the parcel on the porch? We don't like that. It feels unsafe. In the US last year, 260 million parcels were stolen by porch pirates, as they're called. And that's actually more than the total volume of parcels in Sweden each year. Much more. I think it's 40 million more. In Sweden, of course, parcels get stolen, but very, very few. And PUDOs and parcel lockers are much safer than just leaving on the porch.
Yeah, and the Amazon GM in Sweden, we talked about her earlier, she said also in the same interview that she felt that eventually Sweden is going to go down the same route as the US, where home deliveries will be the only sort of natural option. Well, we think it's totally the other way around. We think that change, we know that change is happening. It's happening right here in New York City as we speak. Have a look here.
Yeah, this is a new initiative with carrier-neutral parcel lockers, where any carrier can use them. And you can drop off the parcel 24/7, and the customers can pick them up anytime they want to.
Okay, but enough of this, enough of two Swedes talking about e-commerce.
Yep.
Let's instead hear it from a man who has successfully tackled all these things. And just as the Beatles appearing on the Ed Sullivan Show, this changed music in the US forever, we believe that hearing Gordon Knox of FitFlop here today at GELF is going to change US e-commerce forever. So please welcome to the stage Gordon Knox of FitFlop.
So FitFlop. So before I start, just thought I'd introduce myself a little bit. So my name's Gordon Knox. I'm the CEO of FitFlop. Bit of my background. I originally, when I started my working career a few years ago, I started off as a store manager in a retail shop. I loved it, but apart from the public. I kind of worked my way through that kind of retail thing, did the area manager bit, the regional manager bit. And then I was asked to spend what the company I worked for at the time called cross-fertilization, which was quite a cool. But basically, go and work somewhere else in the business and learn a bit more about the business. So I was lucky enough, or at the time I didn't know it was lucky, but I was lucky enough to be asked to go and work in logistics. So I spent 6 months managing a small warehouse, and God, did I love it. I just thought it was amazing. Loved the union, loved all the challenges that came with that whole world. It was always, obviously, before e-commerce came around. So it was a very simple world then. We just had Christmas, really. And the rest was just kind of kicking around. And then I kind of had running bigger sites. I then moved across to work for Burberry, the UK fashion brand. And that was my introduction into kind of global logistics. So I started off looking after their UK operations, then UK Europe, and then their global operations, which was quite cool as the brand kind of grew and grew. But as all things happened, so I was there 9 years, and we had operations in US, UK, Italy, Korea, Hong Kong, China. So it was kind of pretty all over the place, and so got loads of air miles, spent loads of times in airports, never saw the family, and decided it was time to maybe take a bit of a less travel. So I joined a UK brand called Super Dry, a clothing apparel. This is one of their jumpers. They were having a big trouble with their warehousing operations, so I kind of went in there and helped fix that, and then took the whole global show with them. Their growth was enormous, 20-30% year on year, and kind of got up to just short of $1 billion as a brand, and then they've kind of started to decline. And then 2 years ago, I left Superdry to join FitFlop. So I'm going to give you a quick run through of kind of a little bit about the brand, a bit of PR. Not very good at it, but I'll give it my best shot. And then the last slide is really just about how operationally we're set up. So I'll talk through a little bit about that, and then I think Gary's going to come up and then grill me about a few questions that I haven't got any clue what they are. I've never been shown them, and then we'll talk through some questions, and then we'll see how it goes. Okay? So Marcia was the founder back in 2007. She's a serial entrepreneur, got a lot of energy. She's got a lot of brands from her past. Currently got 2 on the go. So she's a super intelligent lady. Got a load of energy, a lot of ideas, and really interesting to work for. Customers love the brand, love the shoe. It's a very technical shoe. I'm wearing them now. We went through a really challenging period during COVID, as I think pretty much everybody did. We got through that and came out of that. Here's a few statistics, because you've always got to put some statistics in a slide when you're presenting. So yeah, we were sold in 73 countries, which is quite cool. And that increases every year. Our commercial teams are doing a fantastic job in building the brand. 5,000 doors, I think it's up 5,500 now. 133 stores across the globe. I think that's actually 150 now, because we've just opened a whole load in India. So yeah, some good numbers, and we're in good growth. When I joined 2 years ago, we were doing about 3.6 million pairs of shoes. We're now over 5. So despite all the headwinds that we're all facing, the brand's doing quite well. A little bit of background. So as I said, 2007 it started. Marcy had this concept of having a really comfortable shoe that people could wear all day long. So this first shoe here, that sketch there with the 1, 2, 3 in it, this was our what we call a micro wobble board. And it's 3 compounds of material. And it's there to aid the walking and the comfort of the shoe. It's quite technical to make, quite challenging to get the kind of compounds to all meet and merge together. But one of our most popular shoes is based on that. Some key moments in the brand. I'm not going to go through them all. You can read them. 2008, Oprah helped us. She did a big piece, and her sales went through the roof, which was great from a brand perspective. As we progressed through, we've introduced more technology. the Anatomic Cushion. Not sure where we get the names from, but that's this shoe I'm wearing at the moment. Very comfortable, flexible, ultra flexible kind of sole. Again, quite a technical piece to make. We worked with London Fashion College. Uma Thurman did a big piece with us from a promotional perspective. Coming more into kind of here and now, we introduced the Wonder Welly 2019. I would recommend you get a pair. Very, very light, super comfortable. Sales pitch over. 2021, this was the real turning point of the business. That's when Gianni joined and I joined. I can't understand why my pitch is not on his and his probably he's better looking than me. But anyway, so yeah, Gianni joined. Marcia kind of wanted a new view on the business. Gianni came in and he's brought in a whole new C-suite. We were previously fairly kind of stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap. We did a lot of discounting. We've moved to a more full price brand since Gianni joined. We opened a new head office in Hong Kong. We opened a new office in the UK. And then we brought in more products, different product types. We brought in a performance trainer, which is quite technical again. It's got carbon fiber implants in it. So it's up there with the top-notch trainers, but we don't kind of really brag about it. We just kind of get on with it in our way. We've done some collabs with some designers. Yinka did a piece with us with these really colourful FitFlops. And then we opened our first concept store, or pop-up store, I suppose you would call it, in Westfield in London. It's gone really well. So into the kind of where we are now this year, we've introduced that micro wobble board technology into a trainer as well. So not just into a FitFlop. We've done a big link up with a brand in India, Metro Brands, which is going really well. We opened a store in New York, Mercer Street. Sales are going incredibly well, so if you want to get down there, I'll tell the team you're on your way. Yeah, and that's kind of where we are as a brand. Growth's good. A lot of headwind, as you all know. It's tough out there at the moment. So just to kind of close off on the brand piece, this is a kind of piece from us. It's that jaw-dropping comfort. It's all about the comfort for us and the quality of the product. It's all biomechanics that we work very closely with Calgary University to make sure all the kind of technology is really fit for the job. And then kind of moving on to basically my world. So as COO, I look after all sourcing, manufacturing, freight, inbound, contract logistics, all the outbound. I also look after IT, or the tech team, quality, customer services, and a couple of other bits and pieces. So how we're operationally set up, relatively small business. We have a DC in the UK. We just moved that DC. It was in the north of England, and we've moved it into an area called the Golden Triangle, which is kind of central England, the sweet spot for logistics in the UK, and where pretty much every brand who wants to have that really premium service for the customer is located. So pictures on the right-hand side are the new operation. It opened on the 7th of August, so we just moved it. Really proud of that. In the US, we have a facility. We'll be moving that, and we'll move that to a new facility in Columbus, Ohio. So we're moving provider. That's the empty space is the bit we're going to fill. That's the new DC. So that's why I came over here. Part of the trip was to go and see the guys that we're working with over there. And then lastly, we have an operation in Hong Kong. Originally, it was set up for Tmall, to service the Tmall market in China, which is colossal. So we have an operation in Hong Kong. Very small. Was only planned to be for Tmall, but already the commercial guys are saying, like, what can I do? How we use that facility and that stock pool to service our Asia market? Key things, I think, in terms of some of the discussion points for here is, from that UK-Europe perspective, we moved the DC in August, as I said. As part of that move, we wanted to bond the facility. So FTZ, equivalent. That will take place next year, and that will help us with the movement into Europe and the duty movements into Europe. And the other part of that was to put in a carrier management system, because in UK and Europe, there's a vast array of carriers that you really need to engage with to make the operations work correctly. So we linked up with these guys, the nShift team, and implemented that as part of the Go Live. So that's kind of where we're up to. I'll introduce Gary Carlisle. He'll introduce what he does at nShift.
Thank you, Gordon. Afternoon, everyone. So, Gary Carlo. I'm the EVP of Customer Growth at nShift. I think I've been working with yourself, Gordon, for, 6 years now?
Yeah, sorry, I was told there was water under here.
Okay, so I've got a number of questions here that I've kind of pre-put together, so nothing too stressful. But hopefully give you a bit more deeper understanding of some of the pitfalls in Europe and some of the challenges, but some of the opportunities as well. So, 3 years on, or 3.5 years on since Brexit, what has it meant for you as a retailer? But more importantly, what does it mean for the American retailers?
Yeah, Brexit. That still kind of angers me to this day. But anyway, so Brexit has made a massive impact on the UK, because essentially, we operated as the same as the US. We were just a state within Europe. We're no longer a state within Europe. We now have to export out of UK. So it's all the customs clearance, all the customs documentation, all the paperwork. So it's just made life a lot more complicated, a lot more expensive, and it's just a pin in the proverbial. A lot of businesses. So when I moved to FitFlop, they basically hadn't got their act together, and we basically weren't shipping into Europe. So our commercial business was severely hampered, really, by our inability to cross-border into Europe because of all the changes. And you've got crazy stuff with Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland because, they're one's in Europe, one isn't. So, if I go back to my Super Dry days, we had a warehouse in Europe and we had a warehouse in the UK when I was at Super Dry. And we serviced Northern Ireland from Europe. So we took the product all the way through the UK, from Belgium all the way through the UK into Southern Ireland, when our warehouse was literally 3 hours from the port to take us in the UK. So it's just nuts.
So moving on from Brexit, when it comes to customer deliveries then, what's the demand in Europe compared to North America? So we talk a lot about convenience, we talk about speed, we talk about sustainability. How do you see that from your journey across the brands you've worked with?
I think my biggest, the way I see the difference between the US and Europe is probably more in customer demand for speed more than anything. I think the US customer gets the scale of the US and kind of gets that it takes a few days to get somewhere with a product. UK is just faster and faster and faster and faster, and it's later and later and later and later cut-off points. So if you can't do a 10 p.m. cut-off for a guaranteed next-day delivery in the UK, you're not really in the game from a high-ish volume retailer. So Europe's kind of different. It's kind of split. I think the guys touched on it really well with the Pudo piece in north of Europe versus the south. That's not as relevant. Again, going back to Super Dry, because we did a lot more volume in Europe, I think we had somewhere in the region of 20 carriers that we worked with in Europe. So to be able to do an e-commerce operation with all of those different carriers and different services that each of those carriers provided is super, super complex. And that's where a company like these guys who can do all of that integration with all of the different carriers becomes super important.
So with that, In terms of the customer demand and what you see, how much does that influence the partners you use for the final mile?
Oh, it's vital. I mean, in Northern Europe, a lot of brands now are providing the actual name of the carrier, and so the customer is selecting the carrier. And in a lot of cases, that they'll show a price differential on the screen. So the customer, and I know a lot of my friends in the UK, they will say, why can't you offer me a certain carrier? Because I like, for example, a Hermes delivery versus a DPD, because I know the carrier, I know the delivery guy, he knows where to leave my parcels if I'm not in the house. So that movement to very personalized services is becoming a big thing in Europe.
So in Europe, we talk a lot about the local heroes, if you like. And obviously with the ever-changing landscape of the carriers, it's very complex. We know that as a business, having to maintain the integrations. How do you keep up with the changing landscape of what's on offer? And
Talk to you.
and how frequent would you normally change these types of carriers?
I guess it depends on how progressive you are as a business. And there's the whole sustainable piece, I think, is growing a lot of momentum, and being able to offer green services to customers as well as standard services is becoming much more relevant. And there's so many cool kind of delivery options that are available now. And being able to plug them into your network very easily is key. And trying to keep ahead of the competition in that world, and just offering the really cool stuff that customers want, I think is really important. But as we all know, to do that technically is very difficult when you go through all your WMS, your order management systems, etc. You spend most of your time trying to do all of that back-end plumbing to get it to work. And so for me, it's being able to work with partners who are flexible and can be flexible.
Yeah. And how about the return space? How do you keep that consistent across lots of different markets within Europe? Is there any kind of special legislation you need to take into consideration?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, every country has its own idiosyncrasies, really, in terms of what you can and can't do from a returns perspective, how quickly you have to process a return, what packaging you have to use, what labeling you need to use. So again, depending on the size of the product, there's just a layer of complexity that sits in amongst all of that you just, you need to have a good partner who understands that and who can give you the feedback.
And obviously with shipping and returns, there's a cost to you as a retailer. Have you seen what's the willingness across the different markets of customers willing to pay for shipping, but also returns?
They don't want to pay. I mean, in the UK, there's quite a few bigger brands have started to introduce a charge for returns, but they tend to be where they've got a heavier bricks and mortar estate. So they're using the kind of charge to drive the customer back into the store to then get an additional sale, etc. So I think if you've got a good bricks and mortar network within your brand, they're using and maximizing that. If you're a pure player, it's just a cost of operating. And then certain countries, Germany for example, you're looking at pretty much a guaranteed 50% return rate. It's just every brand I've worked for, that's been the return rate. So you've got to understand that certain markets you'll be hit with a bigger return rate just because that's how they operate.
Okay, so moving on to the fulfillment part. On your last slide, you talked a lot about your distribution network and how you set yourselves up. What is the top tips for the audience today that you would give to be successful in Europe?
It's flexibility. That's all for me. It's having a WMS system that can be flexible. It's a stock pool that you can flex between, and it's being able to select different carriers for different countries at different times. you know, and then the Brexit piece just adds a little bit of complexity against the UK, Europe. So if you're putting a footprint and stock into UK, Europe, it's really just deciding how you do that and with what partner and how that should really be set up to optimize.
Just one final question, because I see the count has gone on the clock. How did you come up with a strategy on where to place your distribution centres?
That's really easy. We just do a center of gravity. So we just get the number crunches, and we just give them all of our data, where we get all the source, all the products, all the returns information, every bit of information we can, chuck it into a big computer, and it tells you that's the point. But I can already tell you where it is in the UK. It's in the Golden Triangle.
And what's the main benefit of the Golden Triangle?
Well, it's basically where all the carrier hubs are. They're all based around that triangle area. Every DC, it's basically just sheds everywhere.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Gordon, Gary, thank you very much. I actually really love where you mentioned flexibility, right? Again, that's almost an underlying, theme for us, as we've been talking of, these changing, business models, and, that agility, isn't easy to come by. But again, really appreciate the story. Mats and Axel, thank you for bringing some energy to the stage.